Have you ever questioned something in your life?
Don't start by asking a question, that's so cliche! Literally everybody does that.
But our entire podcast is about questioning, so it's fine.
Whatever, just get on with it.
I'm William Moon.
And I'm Catherine Dykes.
And you both suck.
Who let this guy in here?
I might have forgot to close the door on the way in.
And I plan to stay here.
Anyway, William and I are freshmen at UTSA who are just as confused and lost as any freshman in college. I guess we thought that making a podcast about being confused and lost would help somehow.
Well, if you think about it, we might be able to talk to some people who were lost, but found their way somehow. You might be able to get some advice on how to get through the maze of life.
Oh, so now you think you're all fancy because you can use a metaphor?
What's wrong with that?
William, just move on.
Okay, my bad. We all know that at a very young age, we would constantly question the world around us. However, we never quite stopped. It seems like people are always searching for answers, whether they're a little kid asking why they can't have candy before bed, or a philosopher asking what our ultimate purpose is. Among those questioning are individuals here in the UTSA family. We wanted to see multiple perspectives on the topic of questioning, so we did some questioning of our own, with hopes of finding out what experiences others had had where they questioned just about anything. First, we spoke with Matt, a biology major at UTSA. He's a prominent member of Spectrum, UTSA's LGBT organization. His story speaks to how personal identity can evolve when we start to ask questions about ourselves.
When I was 13, I want to say 13 or 14, my parents went on my iPod one day after I got grounded, and they saw the websites I was on, and they were just like, "Are you gay?" And I was like, I really had not sat with the question myself. I didn't really think about it, and so it was a very interrogation kind of way they asked me. So I just kind of freaked out. I told them I think maybe I'm bisexual. I was a scared little kid. And then later, I did find out I was strictly into girls.
Matt is a transgender man. He came out as trans a year or two after the incident with his parents and figured that if he was a boy who had dated girls, he must have been a straight boy.
Telling people, I was like, well, now it makes a lot of sense because I'm just a guy who's straight, and it made a lot of sense.
Then he experienced something that brought his sexuality into question for the first time in years.
I was a happy little straight boy for a couple years until one day I was dating someone and they told me, they were like, I think I'm a guy too. And I made some joke, I was like, oh, I guess now I'm gay. Well, then later I really did ask myself, well, shit, am I gay? And I started questioning my sexuality again.
Sometimes, one change in our lives can bring a question we thought we'd already answered back into the spotlight. You might have experienced something like this yourself. Maybe you didn't question your sexuality, but many of us are guilty of coming to conclusions that we later have to re-examine. You realized that a food you hated is actually a lot better than you remembered, or you found a new friend in someone you had previously disregarded. However, questioning isn't always on an individual scale. It can play into entire cultures, with differences in questioning that you might not expect.
Hold on, you actually traveled around the world for this podcast? I'm not sure we were supposed to go that far.
Hey man, I wish I could afford to do that. Instead, I interviewed someone here at UTSA who had the experiences we were looking for. Mimi Yu, who goes by Yu Sensei, is the Associate Director for the East Asia Institute at UTSA. She enjoys teaching about Japanese language and culture, and she likes to promote diversity on campus. She has taken groups of students to study abroad in Japan, and she explains how these kinds of trips can really make you think.
I think students also ask a lot of these questions, why certain things are this way, especially when I take students for study abroad, they would look at Japan and say, why do they do things this way? And without really telling them, they were able to infer. And then later they would look at themselves, look at their own culture, and question why we aren't doing things this way, or why we do things this way, and which way is better.
So, we know that Americans ask questions when traveling to Japan, but do people across other cultures question things too?
Questioning is really not a social norm among Asian people. They may complain about some of the, say, policies that are being implemented, in a workplace, but a lot of times they will prefer not to speak up. Or they will prefer not to speak against, the administration or management team.
What about the students?
But in the Asian culture, however, it's usually teachers, professors, they lecture. They don't really ask for class participation. And the students, even if they hear something they don't agree, they do not voice their opinions. And they would just think, well, that he's the teacher, so who am I to say something like this?
Although Yu Sensei shows how difficult questioning can be in Asian cultures, one of the best ways to question your own culture is to travel to another one. You may find out some differences that you would have never expected, and start questioning why these differences even exist. So we know that students ask a lot of questions, but once they're out of school, the questions stop, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Once you get your first job, you're set for life.
If only it were that easy.
You're right. Even after choosing a job, we often continue questioning. It can be to the point where we aren't even sure about the path our entire life is supposed to take, despite thinking we had it all figured out before. Brent Floyd, an academic counselor from the Honors College, put it this way.
When you hit 35, no, you have not figured it out. When you hit 45, you have not figured it out. I read an interview, it was a guy, he was a violinist, and he was like 83 years old. He was a professional concert violinist, traveled the world, played with Yo-Yo Ma, and still practiced the violin every day. Somebody asked him, why are you practicing every day? And he's like, because I think I'm getting the hang of it. That's the attitude, right? That's the attitude you need to have, is that you're not going to figure it out, but that shouldn't stop you from asking.
Oak de Berg is a philosophy professor at UTSA, but before coming here, he served in the Air Force for over 30 years. During this, he gained an aerospace engineering degree, but despite working in a scientific field, he never really stopped thinking back to the philosophy classes he had taken in undergrad. In fact, he just found more things to ask questions about, especially as an officer during the tense period of the Cold War.
My first job in the Air Force was as a missile launch officer, which meant I had to sit underground for 24 hours and look at a bunch of blinking lights. So I read philosophy books while I watched the lights getting ready to blow away half the world with nuclear weapons. And so you begin to ask yourself, as you were interested in questions, you ask yourself, here I am, 22, 23 years old, sitting underground with a bunch of nuclear weapons at my disposal. What's this all about? And so you read philosophy books and you start to not question what you're doing, but asking yourself, why? Is this what I should be doing? Is this what young people are meant to be?
Coming back to today, Professor de Berg teaches a class on military ethics. His personal experience with the threat of nuclear war is a topic that he now discusses with students. He talks about how in the 1960s, just a few people in charge of nuclear warheads, people in his very position, could launch a war of unprecedented destruction.
They gave each crew member weapons, You had a handgun that you went underground with. Ostensibly, this was to stop the Russian hordes after the nuclear war started. And you say, well, everybody knew that was BS, right? I mean, so what could it be for? Well, you're only down there with one other guy. And so you say, oh, this is in case he goes crazy. Or, if the nuclear war happens, there's not going to be Russians coming down into the hole to kill two guys. And so you begin to say, what is this? What's really going on here?
How does a young man fresh out of college, or anyone for that matter, find peace in this kind of situation? How do you find meaning in everyday life when you were that close to a nuclear apocalypse, having the power to start a war that could wipe entire countries off the map? Or what about knowing that you might need to take another man's life for the greater good? Professor DeBerg turned back to philosophical texts to bring understanding into his life.
So you read various philosophers that talk about what's the right thing to do, and then you expand from considering your role in the military to just philosophy in general. What does it mean to lead the right kind of life? There's no cosmic deal that says, here's what life means. But you, as the existentialist might say, can make meaning for yourself. And so you have to ask yourself, how am I going to do that? What's going to be meaningful? Your choices are going to be what makes you what you're going to be. So all your choices count, the big ones and the little ones.
You're going to be faced with choices each day of your life. They may be as monumental as the ability to start a nuclear conflict, but they might seem insignificant, like choosing whether or not to donate $1 for charity. But they all shape who you are. So ask yourself what impact you want to make, and make it meaningful. We felt like Professor DeBerg summarized the topic of questioning perfectly when we spoke to him. In his words,
questioning is exactly perfect for philosophy, because that's what it is. The best philosophers in the world are 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. Hey, why is the sky blue? Well, why is that? Why? And then pretty soon you say, be quiet because I told you. And that's wrong. So now you get to the point where following orders. Okay, yes, sir, I'll do that.
Professor Glasscock of UTSA's writing program expressed how important she feels that questioning should be in our lives.
Any political belief, any religion, any organization, any situation that does not allow you to ask questions is repressing your freedom. So I would avoid any institution that doesn't allow you to question. And again, that's, straight up everything you can think of. Science allows you to ask questions, no problem. But if you're in a situation where you're not allowed to ask questions, they don't encourage it, you're in the wrong place.
We found a common thread among the people we interviewed. Everyone seemed to understand the importance of questioning in our lives, acknowledging that it has the power to shape who we are. When we start to question the things we had previously taken for granted, we no longer blindly go along with whatever we're told. The only way to know if we're following the right path is to examine it critically. That means to look inside of yourself or to the world around you and start asking questions. We hope you enjoyed our podcast. Thank you so much for listening.
Oh, you're welcome. Not that I enjoyed it or anything.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Have a great day and keep questioning. Bye.
Bye.